Okay, scholars, welcome to review for A-Push Unit 8 on Nationalism. And I'm going from top down on the review sheet, starting with the top here, Italian versus German unification. The state that led unification. For Germany, that would be Prussia, and for Italy, that would be Piedmont, which is in northern Italy. The individual who led unification. In Germany, that's Otto von Bismarck, and in Italy, that's Cavour Camillo, who's the chief minister to King Victor Emmanuel II, who's the constitutional monarch of Piedmont. Relationship with France. The Germans are going to invade France to sort of whip up nationalism to get the southern German states as the final part of a new Germany to join this new nation. So war against France by the Prussians and an alliance with France by Piedmont as they together are kicking the Austrians out of the northern Italian states. Attitude towards the church. The Germans had what's called the Kulturkampf under Otto von Bismarck, and this is basically to put the church in its place. That's the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is strong in the southern part of Germany, and this is the last part of Germany to join. This is the part of Germany that's perhaps more sympathetic to Austria, a fellow Catholic nation, and there's a concern here for control over Catholic schools. And it's this idea of control over the minds of young children. What sort of curriculum will they be taught? And Otto von Bismarck wants a nationalist curriculum, sort of raising support for this new Germany that's really in the shape of Prussia. So German priests are arrested, foreign priests are kicked out, and it's a war for the control of hearts and minds of education. In Italy, the revolutionaries, the Italian revolutionaries, seize Rome. They seize the Papal States, and the Pope denounces this, but too bad. Differences with each other. Differences as far as the independence movements or not the independence, but the unification, the nationalist movements in Italy and Germany. In Italy, there's two movements. There's one from the north, from the Piedmont, heading south under Cavour, and there's one heading north from Sicily via Naples under Giuseppe Garibaldi, who's the leader of the Red Shirts. And Garibaldi is a Republican. He wants no king. And Cavour, of course, is the servant of Victor Emmanuel II. And what's really amazing and unique about this nationalist movement here is Garibaldi will submit his movement to Cavour's for the sake of putting unity above republicanism. So Italy will have a king all the way into World War II. Giuseppe Mazzini, you should be familiar with him. He precedes Garibaldi and he precedes Cavour. He is the leader of the Young Italy movement, which begins in 1831. And again, the Red Shirts are led by Giuseppe Garibaldi, this Republican revolutionary nationalist leader who leaves Sicily and invades the mainland and is moving south towards the north. Germany, some terms to be familiar with. The Zollverein is an economic customs union. There's free trade in the German states before there is political unity under Otto von Bismarck. How Otto von Bismarck's foreign policy differed from Clemens von Metternich's. Metternich, remember, is the architect of this balance of power, that there should be no nation getting too strong, no more Napoleon. So there's this concern that there's kind of this balance between the nations, their military power vis-a-vis each other, whereas Otto von Bismarck is the exact opposite of this. The unification of Germany brings a huge disruption, huge tipping of the balance of power in Germany's favor. These German states, which are divided and weak, and deliberately so, now become sort of instantly this economic and political and military superpower just overnight. And this is going to upset the balance of power immensely in Europe in the decades to come. Blood and iron refers to this term that Otto von Bismarck says that Germany will not be created as the 1848 Frankfurt Parliament wanted, by a vote, by liberal discussion, and by just sheer political decision, but it's going to be created by boots on the ground. And that's what happens. There's three wars, the first against the Danes to seize Schleswig-Holstein, these southern provinces of Denmark, for this growing German nation. And then you have a war in 1866 against the Austrians. Austrians lose in 7 weeks. They're clobbered by the Prussians. Basically, their star is descending. And then you have the Franco-Prussian War, which is a Prussian/German win. So these three wars whip up nationalism, and there's this patriotic fervor. The Germans are on board one for all and all for one, and Germany is created by warfare, by blood and iron. There's a term here you should be familiar with that's a little bit farther down on the review sheet, realpolitik, and that is a diplomacy based on what's practical, not what's ideological or moral. What works, what's practical. And what's practical is to wage war to make a country, not to talk like they did at the Frankfurt Parliament and get this offer spurned and thrown back in their faces by Frederick William, the King of Prussia at that time, who would not take the crown from the gutter. The Franco-Prussian War is caused, big picture here, by French honor and by German expansion, but the specific cause here is there's a vacancy on the Spanish throne, and through bloodline, the offer goes to Leopold, who is a Hohenzollern prince, and the French are very alarmed. They do not want a double squeeze of ice here with the Germans and controlling Spain and controlling a large nation next door, and they're demanding a guarantee that Leopold will turn this offer down and will not pick it up later. And Wilhelm I orders Otto von Bismarck to send a message to the French that Germany has no intention of taking this crown to the Spanish throne, but they're not offering any guarantee that they're going to give up the right to do this in the future should they change their mind. And the French are asking for a guarantee, and Otto von Bismarck is basically looking for a fight. And you might read that the Ems dispatch is somehow doctored or somehow, it's adulterated somehow in a way that's dishonest. And it's basically the diplomatic language is stripped out, and the French are basically told to stuff it. We're not taking the throne now, but you're not getting any guarantee. You have no right to ask. And the French, out of French honor, declare war on Germany. Disastrous decision, one of the more disastrous ones of the 1800s. The outcome here is, after a few months of warfare, the French army is pulverized and crushed, and Napoleon III is captured at the Battle of Sedan. The French, when they sue for peace and they sign the peace treaty, they have to cough up 1 billion French marks in reparations. They lose Alsace, Lorraine, these two provinces, to the Germans, and the Germans crown the king of Germany, the former king of Prussia here, Wilhelm I or William I. They crown him emperor, Kaiser Wilhelm, in the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles. So this is just a total humiliation for the French, and they do this in 1871. As far as France goes, Dreyfus Affair, you saw the Prisoner of Honor, that I think the most excellent video on this anti-Semitism in France, and this movie shows the depths of anti-Semitism. It's not just a German thing that happens in the 1930s under Hitler, but anti-Semitism shows itself in the conviction unfairly of Alfred Dreyfus, who is supposedly to have given military secrets to the hated Germans. And this affair, this trial in the Dreyfus Affair, is starting in 1894. What it shows about French politics is a huge division between left and right, between monarchists and those who are socialists and who are on the left. It shows division between secularists and the church. And the cover-up, there's not only a cover-up, not only has the military convicted an innocent man, but they find the traitor. They find the guy who did give the secrets, and they exonerate him. They protect him. And Emile Zola, who is this sort of self-promoting journalist, writes an article called J'accuse, in which he exposes the conviction of an innocent man and the cover-up of the guilty party. And basically this is showing this continued turmoil in France between left and right as the French are, they're waiting for that. They're expecting a war again with Germany to recover Alsace and Lorraine. And the reason the army does this, why does the army cover up a guilty man? Well, they don't want the public's confidence to be shattered as they're facing this inevitable war against the Germans. How German annexation of Alsace-Lorraine differed from earlier unification of various German states? Well, the other German states were all independent. They were all just owned by a German prince, and they fall under they basically fall under the control of Otto von Bismarck as he's steamrolling this unification. Whereas Alsace is the property of France. Now, it was a German state. It was captured by Napoleon, but we're talking 1810s here. Alsace-Lorraine is captured in 1871. We're looking at half a century. So at this point, Alsace is, very definitely a French province. So Alsace, the big difference here is this is a former German state that's stripped off of France. Okay, jumping down to the Crimean War, the cause of the war is Russian expansion at the expense of the Ottomans. And Moldavia and Wallachia are these Ottoman provinces. They're Christian provinces, but they're controlled by the Ottomans, and they're taken by the Russians as the Russians are moving south, looking for more access on the Black Sea here. But the Russians are also demanding control over Jerusalem's holy places. And the French and the British are alarmed at this expansion of Russian power. They back the Ottomans. So you should know the sides here. Basically, it's the Russians against everybody, against the Ottomans, against the French, and against the English. Outcome, Russia is defeated after the capture of the Russian port of Sevastopol in Crimea. And the outcome, the big picture outcome here is not just a Russian loss, but a breakdown of this balance of power and a shattering of the concert of Europe. And the concert of Europe, if you remember, these conservative monarchies, the Austrians and the Prussians and the Russians and the English, all were in agreement for keeping the peace, keeping a balance of power. And now there's this drift. There is a lack of backing each other as we're heading towards the end of the 1800s and into the early 20th century. Russia, Alexander II, you need to know he's the guy who frees the serfs, 1861. He also sets up elected local small town governments called zemstvos. And how this is different from reform in Great Britain is in Russia it is top down. It's coming from the Tsar. There's no parliament, there's no elected officials making this decision. Huge contrast in Great Britain. Under Gladstone and under Disraeli, these are these two back-to-back prime ministers, kind of in the time period of American progressivism. You have an expansion of the vote under the Second Reform Act. You have the legalization of labor unions. You have the expansion of public education. You have the professionalization of the military through military academies and through merit rather than through commissions based upon blue blood. You have just greater participatory government in Great Britain. So this is coming from the bottom up in contrast from top down in Russia. Austria-Hungary, 1867, in response to Hungarian nationalism. This is the biggest national group in the Austrian Empire, with the exception here of the Austrian Germans themselves. Remember, the Magyars revolted in 1848, temporarily under Louis Kossuth. Well, the Habsburg monarch gives the Hungarians autonomy, gives them self-rule, self-government, not independence, not freedom, but self-rule. And this is called the Ausgleich, A-U-S-G-L-E-I-C-H. The Ausgleich is this dual monarchy. There's one monarch, one Habsburg monarch over both Austria and over Hungary. And the goal here is to keep the Austrian-Hungarian Empire at peace and united and together. Sometimes you'll see this called Austria-Hungary or Austro-Hungary. Sometimes people just still call it Austria just to kind of to abbreviate it, but it's a dual monarchy after 1867. What is nationalism? This is the desire of a people to have their own country based upon usually a common language. It can also include a common ethnicity, a common history, a common religion, and usually, for the most part, it's people who speak Polish, people who speak Hungarian, Ukrainians, Lithuanians, Estonians, Latvians. People of a similar language is usually the key glue. And many of these most of them are actually under the control of other countries, exception being the Italians and the Germans are basically just divided. When might nationalism be an impediment to greater freedom? Nationalism is an impediment. For example, the Hungarians wanted their freedom and they get self-rule in 1867. But under the Hungarians, you have Croats, you have Serbs, you have Romanians, you have these other groups that they're not getting autonomy, their nationalism isn't being honored. So there's this resentment by smaller groups against larger groups that have just come out of an even larger group. So to be a nationalist doesn't necessarily mean you want to share it with somebody else who might weaken your brand new country. So there you have it. These are the key points that will be on the test. Do look at your notes. I do have the PowerPoints on RenWeb, the RenWeb documents if you want to look at them. And I wish you luck, study hard, and carry on.